Hello folks, okay, a short and simple video really to just tell people about something that is not widely known as far as I can tell, and that is that there are many ways of attaching a sword blade to a sword hilt. And for example, the medieval sword, usually the tang, i.e. the bit of the blade which goes inside the handle, runs all the way through, projects out of the end of the pommel and is then pinned, which is the same as riveting, in other words squashed at the end of the tang to clamp the whole assembly together. Very solid way of doing things. The Japanese sword, for example, slides down the tang, which is quite a wide and flat tang compared to most European tangs, and it has one or two, or occasionally I think even three holes that go through, and they put a menuki bamboo or other material peg that goes through the hilt and essentially pins laterally the hilt to the tang. But the tang finishes inside the handle of a Japanese sword and doesn't run out the full end of the grip. And it always amuses me slightly when I see descriptions online of a katana, replica katana, having a full tang, because actually no traditional Japanese sword has a full tang in the true sense of the meaning, because the tang finishes inside the grip and is pinned through. But anyway, now to get to oh, and one other thing I should mention as well, European swords actually sometimes have this method of construction where you have pins going through the side, like a kitchen knife for example, but it is used on usually types of swords known as messers. And Messer is the German word for knife. Messer is a small knife, Großmesser is a big knife, or Kriegmesser, war knife. There's many different, there's Dutch versions called Bauernwehr. I can't pronounce the word because my Dutch pronunciation is very bad. But they are essentially the same construction as a knife, where you have two plates either side of the tang with pins going through, rather than a sword, which in Europe means the tang goes all the way through and then is pinned on the end of the pommel. But what I really want to talk about in this video, or make people aware of, is that many types of Asian sword and knife and large knife don't use any of those construction methods, but are, wait for it, glued onto the tang. And for someone who only really knows about European weapons or Japanese weapons, this can be quite a surprising piece of information. And I remember when I found out, I couldn't quite get my head around the fact that in many parts of Asia, certain types of glue, which tend to be tar-based, I think, and they're very, very solid, are actually used to attach the hilt to the blade. And in India, this is pretty much the standard method of connecting tulwar hilts to tulwar blades. They are glued on. And you should think of this glue, not like a modern glue, but think of it almost like tarmac that they put on the road. It's dark coloured, very thick, gunky stuff, almost like paste. And they fill the grip, the hilt, with this material, and when it's heated, when it's hot, and then essentially force the tang, which probably finishes in most, not in all Indian swords, but in most Indian swords somewhere near the pommel, but not going all the way through the pommel. I should mention some Indian swords do run all the way through the pommel, but most don't. So the tang runs up for about 3/4 or a bit more of the length, and is actually essentially glued, and when it cools and sets, you have a very, very solid hilt on your tang. And during your lifetime, and during several lifetimes to come, that should never come off. However, for those of us who collect antique weapons, from looking at Indian and other nationality swords, we know that often that glue, after probably 100 years or more, sometimes can start to come apart, and that's why you get loose when you hold the sword and you go like this, and the blade just moves a little bit in the hilt. That's the reason, essentially, because of contraction and age and other reasons, temperature change, humidity change, that kind of tar-like glue inside the hilt just kind of gives up and just becomes a bit loose. And it can be fixed, it can be replaced. And places where I know that this type of glue is used to attach hilts, India, parts of Southeast Asia, so certain types of parang and barong and things like that are more or less glued into the hilt. I believe Nepalese kukris are the old style, not the modern type, but the old style of kukris are basically glued into their wooden hilts. And also the Middle East, so with Shamshir, although they do put pins through the handle to connect it to the tang, they also use this glue, so they're sort of using a double whammy to get it completely solid. So yeah, so not all historical and antique and real swords have a full tang. You have tangs that run all the way through and are pinned, you have tangs that are pinned or riveted through the side, and then you have blades which are glued into the hilt. So there we go, thank you.